Hello class, I'm Aaron, your TA. I'm going to do a quick spreadsheet tutorial just because I think that spreadsheets are going to be really useful in this course. In general, electronic spreadsheets are useful for a lot of reasons, but in this course in particular, I'll be using them to do a lot of complex calculations without losing accuracy. We can often lose track of numbers or decimal points when we're using pen and paper. So spreadsheets can be really useful to help us display information without losing the accuracy. If you don't have access to Microsoft Excel, there are some free alternatives. I've got a link here in this spreadsheet that will be posted on the Canvas site. Google Sheets is a great alternative, and we all have access to that through our student Google suite. We also have Open Access and LibreOffice. Open Office and LibreOffice. Those are both free alternatives that you can download on your computer. And Excel actually has their own free web version of Excel that you can use. If you find throughout this tutorial that I'm going too fast for you, you might want to try this YouTube series here, which has some excellent tricks and tips for Excel beginners. Today I just want to go through some example calculations and then some helpful tips that can speed up some of your calculations in Excel. So to start with some example calculations, you notice the background here is white. I like to do that sometimes. You can change that with the View tab. You can go up to View and then click on Grid Lines. And that will turn on and off your grid lines. Sometimes, if I'm doing mathematical calculations, doing it without the grid lines gives it more of a pen and paper feel where you can see everything that's going on. You can also change the weight of the grid lines if you like, but turning them on and off is good enough. So let's do some quick Excel calculations. When you open a cell, you just double click on it and you can type the equal sign. When you type the equal sign, that is telling Excel that you want to do a calculation. So I want that cell to display what I'm about to type. You can also, after you've typed an equal sign, you can click on other cells and it will put a cell reference inside of that cell. You can click around, you can move, and it will reference a bunch of other cells. Once you type an operator, like a multiplication sign or a plus sign, you can then select another cell and it'll add multiple cells in there. So you can do this a bunch of times and add a bunch of different cells. And the nice thing is that they're color-coded so you can see which cells are in which part of the equation. So let's do this actual calculation here. What is x times y? We've got some example numbers right here. So I'm going to say, what is x? I'm going to click on that numerical cell. And I'm going to put an asterisk there, which is the same thing as multiplication. And then I'm going to click on the y cell. And now we can see x times y is inside of this cell next to it, and it is C3 times C4. So that's given us 250. And indeed, 25 times 10 is 250. And we can do a more complicated formula, again, by typing enter and then do x asterisk y divided by z. Now there's parentheses over here on the left, and you notice that I didn't put parentheses on the right. That is 1.25, but I can also add parentheses if I want, and it won't change the answer. If you don't understand why that won't change the answer, then you should go review your order of operations, because that will also be important during this course to know whether you should use parentheses first, or multiplication, or plus or minus. Let's do one more example calculation that's a little bit more complicated. Here we have a times x times y plus z in parentheses. So that means this happens first, then you multiply by a, and then you divide by c times b. So let's try that. I'm going to say equals. I'm going to click the A cell. I'm going to put a parentheses. Actually, I'm going to put an asterisk, then a parentheses. Then I'm going to say x asterisk y plus z, another parentheses. I'm going to put a division sign there. You can put spaces in here if you like to help space things out. That won't change the answer. Sometimes it makes it look easier to read. And then another parentheses, z again, asterisk b. Now these parentheses here at the end are actually really important. Without these parentheses, you'd be multiplying the whole fraction times b instead of dividing by b. All right, so then we click enter, and it gives us 45. So those are just some quick examples about how to do calculations in Excel. I want to go over a few more helpful tips. So a few things I want to mention are freeze panes, moving cells, copy and pasting values, and cutting and pasting columns and rows. I'll go through these individually and show you why they're important. In Excel, you can show and hide columns and rows by highlighting the columns, the headers up here. You have to go through the D through H. You can right-click on them and click Hide. So I've hidden some rows and columns that will be helpful here. So I'm going to go up here. You can either show each one individually by waiting till that little separator icon comes up where it goes to two little lines. Or what I like to do is just highlight both sides of the hidden cells, and you could right-click and then click Unhide, and that will show all of those. Over here I've also hidden some rows. I'm going to unhide those. Hiding and unhiding rows and columns can be helpful when you're trying to clean up your calculations at the end. So one thing that a freeze pane is really useful for is when you have calculations you want to do that are lower in the spreadsheet and you don't want to zoom out to try to get down there, and you need values that are at the top of the spreadsheet and you need to calculate values down at the bottom. So one thing you can do is use a freeze pane to actually freeze the top few rows of the spreadsheet. So you can highlight those rows, you can go to your View tab, and you can click Freeze Panes. Then you can say Freeze Top Row or Freeze Panes. Freeze Top Row just freezes the top row, so you'll see D through H, so maybe that's what you want. And you can scroll down. You can see I'm moving down to the lower part of the spreadsheet, but D through H is still here. Similarly, I can actually do the same thing with the column. If I go to Freeze First Column, then when I shift sideways through the spreadsheet, that first column will still be there. So that can be useful for helping do calculations in big spreadsheets. Next, I want to talk about moving cells. So let's say, for example, we have a calculation here. I've got F plus G. So I'm going to say F is 25 and G is 30. So I'm going to say equals F plus G. Now, let's say you're formatting the spreadsheet or you just want to drag things to move them separately. If you try to cut and paste numbers, like let's say I go in here and I cut that with Control X and I come over here and paste it, well, now I've changed this because now that value of G is no longer there. What I can do instead is actually select this cell, and when I hover over it, I can get those 4 little arrows, and that means I'm allowed to move the cell. So I can actually move it to a different location in the spreadsheet, and it does not change the value of F plus G, because what it actually does is it changes the cell reference. So let me move it back here. When we look in here, we've got F2 and G2, these red and blue cells. When I move G2 over here, if you go back in, you can see that the cell reference has actually changed. It was G2 and now it's K5. So moving cells can be really useful as a useful way to help modify your spreadsheet without changing any of the values. You can move entire groups of cells to different locations in your spreadsheet and it won't affect the results. For instance, I can move both of these down here and it won't change anything. So you can move entire little tables in your spreadsheet. Next, I want to talk about copy and pasting values. Now, something that can be aggravating is when you want to copy and paste a calculated value. So this, again, is calculated based off of other cells. Now, let's say I want to copy this 55 over here. If I click on the cell and say copy, and then I paste it somewhere over here, it turns out to be 0, or it will give you an error. That's because when you copy and paste, you're actually copying the formula, and it changes over here. if you would like to copy and paste values, what you can do is right-click on the cell and click copy, and then when you go to a place where you want to paste the number, you go down here and paste special, and there's this 1, 2, 3, and you can paste just values. Or if you go down to paste special, there's paste values. And then you'll end up with just the cell value over here. That can be really handy if you have a whole table full of calculated values and then you want to paste them somewhere else. All right, one more thing I wanted to mention is that if you accidentally make a mistake while you're editing a formula, like say I accidentally type a bunch of random stuff in here, and I'm like, oh no, I'm going to have to figure out what I changed. You can just press the escape button and it will revert back to whatever it was before you were editing it. Again, you might accidentally type a bunch of gibberish in here or some wrong values, and then before you press enter, you can press escape and it will go back to its original value. One last thing I wanted to mention is cutting and pasting rows and columns. It can be sometimes very frustrating to figure out how to move columns because you can't just drag and drop them. Like here on cells, you can drag a cell and move it in a different place. But if I wanted to move the whole column G, I can't seem to just move the column. But if you highlight the column, you can get that 4 arrows again and then move it, and it will actually try to replace the data in the other column. So that's not what we want to do. Instead, let's say we have that 30 there again. If I wanted to put G in front of H, what I can do is highlight the column and click Cut. Then I can put it in front of another column by right-clicking another column and put Insert Cut Cells. Now G is in front of H, and all of the cell references are still intact. All right, so that's it for the intro to spreadsheets. I hope you have a great term, and I look forward to talking to all of you. Bye-bye.